Hello, guys. Welcome to the Voices Gathering Live podcast show. It's your girl D from Voices Gathering Live. Thank you so much for being patient and waiting for me. I do apologize. For the delay, but when the show is live, what can you do but roll with the resistance? I say that all the time on my social media platforms. You have to roll with the resistance because in rolling with the resistance, there is a lesson to be learned. And I know for me is to give myself permission to not be perfect, that things will happen. And Diamond, embrace the obstacles in your way and overcome them. And when you come over that mountain, you would have learned a lesson. So I'm just teaching myself to be patient and kind and not rush and beat myself up when things don't work out the way I want them to. Without further delay, I wanted to have a conversation with someone who would be able to have a narrative that I think many of you could relate to. And that narrative is what it is to gain your freedom in any way you can. This person who was born into slavery, oppressed by those who didn't give her a chance, to only find her freedom and go back and give others the opportunity to have freedom. So I want you guys to have a conversation with me as I talk to the only renowned, when I tell you renowned Miss Harriet Tubman. Please help me welcome Harriet Tubman to the show. Hello, Miss Tubman. How are you?
I am fine tonight. I hope you can hear me.
I absolutely can hear you, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you?
I'm mighty pleased to be here to talk with you tonight, Miss Diamond.
Thank you so much. I know that you're quite busy doing all that you do for many of us, but I wanted to have a conversation with you about the work that you do and how you got to where you are today. So before I just run my mouth, can you please, Miss Tubman, tell us how did you get where you are today? Please.
Well, I thank y'all for inviting me here so I can tell you about the work that I've done on the railroad. Now, you may think it odd that I, a woman, worked on the railroad, but I did work on the railroad, the Underground Railroad, that is. Now, before I go any further, and so there won't be no misunderstanding, I have to tell you something.
Okay.
The Underground Railroad, it wasn't even underground. The Underground Railroad, it wasn't even a railroad in the true sense of the word. So if it wasn't underground and it wasn't a railroad, then what, pray tell, was it? Well, you see, it was a network. It was a connection of people and places. The folks who work on this railroad belong to a group called themselves abolitionists. Now, they was white abolitionists and they was colored abolitionists too, but they all worked together for the same reason. You see, an abolitionist believed that slavery is wrong. An abolitionist believed that families ought not be separated. An abolitionist believed that mamas ought not have their babies ripped out their arms and sold away, never to be seen again in life. An abolitionist believed that no man should own another. Now, Miss Diamond, I was born a slave. I was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. I was born in 1820. Of course, now it could have been 1821, could have been 1822, might even been 1823, because ain't nobody that particular about when a slave was born, because I was born, because here I am today. On that plantation where I was born, I was owned by a man whose name was Master Brodus. And on Master Brodus's plantation, I worked out in the timber. And I got to be as strong as any man. But I had heard about something called freedom. And I decided I wanted to have me some of that. So in 1849, I decided that I was going to be free. And with the help of those kindly abolitionist folks, I got to my freedom. You see, those folks told me that when I got to Philadelphia, I would have my freedom. And you see, Miss Diamond, I was called Araminta Ross. Folks call me Minty for short. But when I got free, I took my freedom. Now, do you know what that means to take your freedom?
No, can you tell us what does that mean?
That means you put one foot in front of the other and you just walk away from your enslaved place. And that's what I did. I just walked away to my freedom. And folks, when I started making my trips in 1851, folks started calling me Moses. And they started calling me Moses because you know that Moses in the Bible
Mm-hmm.
led folks from slavery to freedom. And since I, Harriet Tubman, have led my folks from slavery to freedom, folks call me Moses too.
Must be an honor to be called Moses.
It is the best honor one could ever have if you leading somebody from being a slave where you don't have no say over what you do, what you say, what you wear, anything. You just do what somebody tells you all day long.
Mm.
So when you get to your freedom, there ain't nothing like it. And I'm going to tell you, when I got to my freedom, I looked at my hands. I looked at my feet. They was the same hands. They was the same feet. Except for one thing. They was free.
Mm.
And such a glory come over me was almost more than I could stand. So like I said, I got to my freedom right there in Philadelphia. It took me now on to 3 months to walk that far from Dorchester County, Maryland, where I was born, to Philadelphia. But you know, there ain't nothing like freedom. I have never in all of my years that I worked on the railroad knowed a slave who didn't have the desire for freedom burning in his belly. Because everybody wants to be free. Everybody ought to be free. Sometimes when I have my passengers, that's what I call them, who travel with me, I call them my passengers.
Mm.
Sometimes they come up to me and say, Harriet, I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm hungry. I want to go back to master. Where's But you know what? They think it's going to be safe when they go back to master. But I'm going to tell you, if a slave been with me and go back to master, he is going to get beat. Overseer's going to beat him, you see.
Mm.
And he'll want to know, where's Harriet? How many's with her? Where's she going? You know? And the tongue get to wagging.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, Underground Railroad ain't secret. Because you know it was secret, but it was also illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could get on it, then you could get to your freedom.
Miss Tubman, can you tell us, and I don't want you to lose your place. Thank you so much, because I don't think we truly understand, or many of us didn't truly understand. First, I will be very honest with you. When I was a child and I heard about you and the work you were doing and helping people gain their freedom, I have to tell you, in school during that time, they didn't teach us the truth about this Underground Railroad, right? So I have to be honest, when I was a child, I really believed that there was an Underground Railroad, that people, there were no longer trains operating on this railroad, so people went underground and walked from one place to another. And as I gotten older, I started to learn the difference, that there was not truly a railroad, but there was a metaphor of the railroad. And this is what you used to take what you were calling your passengers, which were
Right.
other people seeking freedom, correct?
Sometimes they call them freedom seekers too.
Mm.
hmm Yeah, because everybody wants to be free. Because sometimes my passengers, you know, they would want to go back and, no, I can't be having that. And so I have to reach in my bag, because I always carried a little bag that had some necessary things in it.
Mm.
And I have to reach in my bag and pull out my friendly persuader, if you get my drift. And I would say, live free or die. And all of a sudden, they wanted to keep on walking for the cause of freedom.
So, Miss Tubman, when you would carry your good old
Friendly
token,
persuader.
your
Mm-hmm.
friendly persuader,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask you, were members of your family who were seeking freedom during that time, were also some of these individuals who were willing to go back and be under the master's control opposed to walking this journey?
Yes, some of them was, and some of them did go back. And I don't know whatever happened to them because I never see them no more. But you see, what I would do, I would go to, well, let me tell you. My mama, her name was Harriet Green Ross,
Okay.
and my papa's name was Benjamin Ross. And you know what? They was the last folks that I took to freedom. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because they stayed back and helped me get passengers
Mm.
because they would be on the lookout and they would I would send word to my mama and my papa that I was going to be at a certain place at a certain time. And if anybody wanted to ride on the Freedom Train
Mm-hmm.
or the Liberty Line, then they just show up. Now, only you know if you want to get on that train.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that you had to do was do as I say. Because if you don't do as I say, then you put everybody else at risk,
Mm-hmm.
you see. Because the railroad was secret and it was also illegal. But it was the only way to freedom before that proclamation come out.
Did you have to use your friendly persuader to, did you actually have to use it to maintain the status of getting those to freedom?
Uh, well, I never did have to actually use it, but I believe I did a lot of intimidating. You see,
Oh, okay. Okay.
you know about John Brown. You've heard of him, John Brown. He was a white man, but
Mm-hmm.
he was a martyr for my people because he put together that insurrection there at Harper's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted me and Frederick to come with him, but we decided against it. I was down low sick, and Frederick said no, he wasn't going to do that. And I'm glad Frederick didn't because, you know, John Brown, he didn't come to a good end. What
Mm-hmm.
he come to was the end of a rope because
Mm-hmm.
they hanged him. But he done more for the cause of freedom as a white man than only Father Abraham did with that proclamation
Mm-hmm.
and that war, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
It did. It really did. And I'm just wondering, and I could be mistaken, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Mr. Brown got a lot of credit for what he
Hmm.
had done for the people.
Well, some folks considered him a traitor because they did hang him as a traitor
Mm-hmm.
and committing treason because against he was against the abolition of slavery. He didn't want slavery to continue. He
Mm-hmm.
came all the way from that place in Kansas, Osawatomie or Osapotamie or something like
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
and come all the way over to Harper's Ferry. And he was gathering folks to be freed with him because they was gonna take over that munitions center right there in at Fort Sumter, but it didn't turn out well for him.
Um, so, Miss Tubman, so
Hmm.
you go back, you get your family, and you get all those who are willing to take this journey to freedom.
Right.
And your family will stay back so that they can tell people, whoever want to get on this freedom ride, this is
Hmm.
where the train is pulling into the station, and this is
Correct.
where you get on board for the journey.
Right.
And
That
you,
is absolutely correct because my mama and my papa, they was the very last passengers that I took on my trip. They, I made my last trip. Oh, right before that war come on. That war come on in 1861, and I made my last trip like in the winter of 1859 and 1860. And I took my mama all the way up into Canada and my papa, where they could join with my brothers and my sister, who I'd already taken up there on one of my first journeys. Now, do you know why I took folks all the way up into Canada?
No, I don't.
Because it was only in Canada that had outlawed that slavery thing way before the United States did. And
Hmm.
it was only under the paw of the lion. The flag for Canada at the time, it had a lion.
Mm-hmm.
He was standing on his hind legs and
Mm-hmm.
his front legs was up in the air. And it was only under the paw of the lion that a colored man could truly be free. And that was because of that fugitive slave law, which the government had give out in 1850.
Mm.
Hmm. And that said something like this, that even if an escaping slave is captured on free soil, he could be sold back into slavery. So there wasn't nowhere you could go to be truly free except in Canada, which was not part of the United States, and they had outlawed that slavery thing years before we did.
So,
Hmm.
so you have taken some of your passengers from there into Canada.
Hmm.
Miss.
I didn't always take them all the way there. I
Okay,
would pass them on to other conductors
got it. Okay. Have you
who
ever won? I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
who knew the way, to get there
Uh
because
huh.
I had showed them the way.
So, two questions popped up. First question is, when you were on your journey and
Mhm,
traveling, have you
mhm.
ever got to a point that you wanted yourself to actually not return back, even though you?
No, no, I,
Oh,
I never. Folks need to be free.
mm,
I don't think there was ever a slave born that didn't want to be free. I'd have freed more slaves if they'd only known they were slaves, but that was all they knew how to be. They didn't know nothing about freedom because they'd never had the sweet taste of freedom.
so you can't miss what you don't have.
There you go. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, hmm.
I
And
get
and
it.
and they never knowed about freedom, so they didn't have no idea as to what it was like to be free. Because there would be others. Sometimes slaves would run away,
Mm-hmm.
they get caught, huh, come back, master would beat them, master would whoop them, master would most often sometimes chop off their feet. You know why you get your feet chopped off? So you can't run.
Mm.
So you can't run to freedom. That happened to folks. Because that slavery thing was the most horriblest thing that anybody could ever think of.
It's funny, Miss Tubman, when I knew that you agreed to come and have a conversation with me, my mind was going to so many different places. My mind was going to a place of where I'm now in the 20th century and where you were so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Tubman, as you tell your story, can you just, based on the information you may know of from today's society, can you
Mm-hmm.
just tell me what are your views about you growing up as a child in slavery and fighting for your freedom, and people today still live in a mind of slavery? What is your thought about that?
You know, be, I'm going to tell you, when I was but a child, I first started working in the big house with my mama, but there was a bowl of sugar on the table. I'd never had no sugar before. I tipped it over because I wanted to taste it.
Mm,
Hmm. I did that, got in trouble, and got sent to the woods to work with my papa. But I didn't mind working with my papa because working with my papa, he taught me stuff, all kind of things about the woods and the forest, like what plants you could eat, what plants was good for medicinal purposes
Mm,
and what plants you better stay away from because they'd kill you because they's poison. Now, I didn't know I was going to have to have that knowledge years later, but it
mm,
did come in handy
mm-hmm,
when I was out there on the railroad. And you know, folks folks don't really realize in these day and times that in the time that you live in about how precious freedom is. They just don't realize it. Freedom, it ain't free. You have to work at it. You have to keep working at it so it can continue to be free. I understand from folks who have, told me about how things work in this world that you live in
mm-hmm,
that it's getting kind of scary.
mm-hmm.
Our, our, our rights, our privileges, they just kind of being chipped away by folks who don't want us to be totally free like we ought to be,
Mm.
you know? And I believe there's other reasons why folks who look like me and you, they call us and brown people too, those Latin folks come
Mm-hmm.
from Mexico and wherever,
Mm-hmm.
that we are now the minority is the word they use. But before too long, we're going to be the majority. And I think those folks who are in the majority now, I think they getting a little bit frightened because it's going to be more of us than them. I've heard that might be coming in the next 20 years or so. That's what I've heard.
I'm so glad that I will continue to say and be really humble in saying it that I believe that people today don't know their history. And I put on one of my platforms, Miss Tubman, I don't know if you know about those platforms, but those platforms are called many things that we can share information on. And I shared there that how can we expect people to teach their freedom? I mean, teach their history when they fail to learn their history. Right.
Right. That would be very, very hard. I think there's some person, I forget his name, but he says, know your history because if you don't know it, you're going to repeat it. And we don't need to repeat none of the history that we had. We don't need necessarily to make America great again, for example, because in the eyes of some folks, make America great again was prior to, let me see, I'll just say like 1954 or 1919 when women got the right to vote, or even go back further before that proclamation and that 13th Amendment was passed. 13, 14, and 15, those are important amendments to that United States Constitution that made us to be on an equal par. Now, I know we ain't necessarily equal. On paper, we might be equal, but we have to work. The struggle continues. You know, my friend Frederick said, without struggle, there is no progress. And so we have to keep struggling to move forward. Because if you move backwards, that ain't doing nobody no good. And there is folks who would like us to be where we were prior to a whole bunch of things that happened for the good of the nation, not just for the good of some folks, but for the good of all folks.
For the people who are watching the show, and I'm again so grateful to have this conversation, and I want to just kind of grab bits and pieces because due to the delay, I don't want to keep Miss Tubman that long. Miss Tubman, I'm going to jump back a little bit. When you were enslaved, and you were not always, you were Harriet Minty, but Harriet Tubman. How did you get your last name? How did you become Tubman?
Because I married a man whose name was John Tubman. John Tubman was a free man. John Tubman lived on a neighboring plantation to Mr. Dorchester, my master. And I guess he just stayed there because he didn't have nowhere else to go. He hired himself out. You know what that means? You have to give back some of your pay to your former master so you can continue to stay there, like his room and board. But me and John Tubman, you see, we married up in the slave way in 1847. But in 1849, when I decided I was going to be free, I said, John Tubman, do you want to be free with me on free soil? He said he was already free, so he wasn't going nowhere. I said, well, I ain't free, so I left. But when I started making my trips in 1851 and I come back to Dorchester County, Maryland, I thought I'd see what old John Tubman was up to. Well, John Tubman had took up with another woman. So that was all of me and John Tubman. But I still go by his name. But now I'm married to a man whose name is Nelson Davis. You probably never heard of him.
I have not. And so, Miss Tubman, so you married, and you married Mr. Tubman, who was or believed to be a free man on a adjacent property.
Right.
And although you left him because he was not a faithful man, you remarried and you kept the name Tubman. Is there any reason why you kept the name Tubman?
Because my Nelson, he was very proud to be married to Harriet Tubman, because we didn't get married till 1869, long after the war had ended. But he was very proud to be married to Harriet Tubman because he knowed all about the things I had done. And he was very proud. And, you know, he was a big man in his thinking, a big man in his, he wasn't embarrassed. He was proud to be Mr. Harriet Tubman.
Miss Tubman.
Take a certain kind of man to be proud to be Mr. Harriet Tubman.
And I'm going to tell you, Miss Tubman, let's be very clear. In this day and time now, we do not find too many men who's willing to be Mr. something, opposed to, your great husband letting you carry the name of Harriet Tubman because of the work you've done under that name, and not covered that by giving you a new name, because you were still his wife, so he didn't need your name to be changed. Your love was enough.
You are very right, Miss Diamond.
Listen, I have let me see, we have something here. Were you ever afraid that the slaves who went back would tell that you were where you were going or what you were doing? Sorry. So one of the questions were you ever afraid that the slaves who would go back would tell what you were doing?
I didn't have very many of them go back, you see, because I told you what I would tell them. Live free or die. So all of a sudden, they really wasn't going to go back.
Okay. So there's a good answer. Well, Miss Tubman, how did your passengers who had children or babies carry these children and babies and keep quiet on this long journey?
The whole family need to be free. And if the mama has a baby in her arms or a little child that she got to carry by the hand, they still need to be free. But I told you, in my bag and in the woods, there would be medicinals, plants that you could use that my papa taught me about. But also in my bag, I carried some medicinals that a kindly Quaker abolitionist doctor give to me. You ever heard of something called paregoric?
No.
You ever heard of anything called laudanum?
Yes.
So if you make a little tea, for lack of a better word to call it, if you dip like a rag or a handkerchief in a little bit of paregoric or a little bit of laudanum, put a little water on it and give it to a child and have him suck on it, it'll put him to sleep. And if you give an adult person enough of it, it'll make them very tranquil, and they'll do what you need to have them do. Because, did I tell you this? That John Brown called me General Tubman because he said I was in charge. I had to be in charge. Otherwise, there would be all kind of havoc caused if people didn't do as I told them to do.
Mm.
So I had to be in charge.
And you had to be in charge, and there were a lot of men who were passengers on this journey who had to
Hmm.
listen to this woman. Miss Tubman, how tall are you?
Oh, let me see. I guess if I was to put on some shoes that had a little bit of a heel, I might be about 5'3".
Hmm. Okay. And you had men following you.
If they wanted to get to freedom, yes.
I guess that's what this is about. It was about coming out of bondage and slavery and to a place of freedom. Now, how many trips did you honestly take?
Well, I really wasn't counting because I don't know how to count. But Mr. Steele, he was the station master in Philadelphia, that was where I usually stopped at, was in Philadelphia, and give my passengers there. Mr. Steele said I made about 13 trips. And every time I would lead folks to freedom. It could be two folks like my mama and my papa. It could have been 8. It could have been 10. It could have been 15 or 20. It don't matter how many it was, as long as they want to get to freedom and do as I say. Whoever came, that's who I took. Because I couldn't decide who to take. Only you know if you want to be free. Only you know if you're going to do as I say. Only you know that. I can't make that choice for you. All I know is you better do as I say if you want to ride with me on the freedom line.
Miss Tubman, here's the thing. I'm going to oh, I could go on and on and on. I have 1,001 questions that I just want to talk to you about. Again, I'm going to ask individuals that are in the chat, even after today's show, because this show will be archived, is that you think about what Miss Tubman is saying, that if you want to be free, you have to be willing to take the journey, and you have to be willing to submit yourself to what the cause is so that you can gain what it is you're seeking. And I
Correct.
don't think enough of us do that in this day, Miss Tubman. I think too many of us make excuses for not being able for not accomplishing what we need to set out and accomplish. But you, a slave girl, born into slavery, decided that you wanted freedom, and you
Mm-hmm.
was willing to put one foot before the other and get your freedom. You was willing to leave a man who thought he was free or pretended to be free or whatever that was for him and gain your freedom. So you left him and his and all he had behind, and you went on this journey, a total of based on what you were told 13 times.
Mm-hmm.
And how long does one trip take?
Well, it take well, like I said, the trip from Dorchester County, Maryland to Philadelphia, that was like 3 months because we's mostly on foot. And we would travel at night and hide in the day. And at night we'd follow that North Star or follow that drinking gourd, and and then in the day we have to hide. I've hid, and my passengers have hid in wagons and under potatoes and in a pigsty. You do whatever you have to do to get to your freedom. And then we would meet along the way, you know, kindly abolitionist folks. And if you was an abolitionist, you probably knew someone in your neighborhood who was also an abolitionist, and they knew somebody, and they knew somebody, and so forth and so on, because there wasn't no map. It wouldn't do no good. Don't know how to read them no way. That's how come we follow them stars and rely on that to get us to the north. And sometimes we'd even follow the moss that grows on the north side of the trees, because all roads that lead north lead to freedom. Did you know the moss grows on the north side of the tree? Because
I,
that's the coolest side of the tree, and that's where the moss can grow.
I absolutely did not know that, and I'm going to tell you that once again. I've learned something, and learning that the moss grow on one side of the tree, learning to pay attention to the stars and find your way to freedom, learning how to use these things that were in the wilderness for you
Hmm.
to be able to care for your passenger. All this was something you learned in your time of being a slave and also traveling and working with your father out there where you were kicked out of the home.
Hmm. Yeah. Who knew that those things would come to be important and helpful to me in my later years? You never know what the good Lord is going to call you to do, but I will tell you this: the good Lord called me to do this work, and where the good Lord leads you, He will not leave you. And He has never left me yet. He is with me still today. And He was with me every step because He was watching over me and my passengers. Because, like I said, Harriet Tubman, I never run my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. All those who traveled with me, they all got to freedom.
Well, listen, if you, if we, I don't care what color you are, can take a chapter from that. If we just pay attention and not ignore our history, not just hear the name Harriet Tubman, but if we would pay attention, ask the questions, dig a little deeper about how did we gain freedom as it relates to Harriet Tubman, what Harriet Tubman did to contribute to this narrative that we currently are operating in. I just don't know. I'm very frustrated when I don't hear enough people talking about Harriet Tubman. I'm very frustrated when I don't hear enough of people saying what Harriet Tubman did. I think that there needs to be mountains and things named after Harriet Tubman, because I don't know anybody. I don't listen. Martin Luther King and you know all those, and it's sad. It's sad that we go to those names, but I don't hear enough about Harriet Tubman. But Miss Tubman, do you know that people are now making movies about you?
What is a movie, first of all?
Okay, so a movie is someone is okay. So just how you live your life, Miss Tubman. What people are doing is paying attention to that, and they're creating stories. And they put these stories on this thing that's called a television, or they call it a movie screen. And we'll talk about what that is later. But they show your life and your journey in leading people to freedom on these pictures and these equipment, so that we can see who Harriet Tubman is. Miss Tubman, you're very big.
So,
You're
so
very popular.
I have had someone capture my image. Because you know Frederick, my
Yes.
friend Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that Frederick had more of those pictures of him took than any other person of his time? And they was capturing his image on I think they call it a photograph or something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
So that's what they're doing for you, Miss Tubman. Is they're capturing? Listen, Miss Tubman, the language I'm going to be using, you probably wouldn't even understanding. Like, it's called Google, it's called Alexa, it's called all of these different things, and they get to tell us information about you. But I'm going to tell you that there's no better person or equipment that can tell me about Harriet Tubman than Harriet Tubman.
Well, thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate it, because can't nobody tell my story any better than me. Because
Absolutely.
I'm the one that lived it. Can't nobody tell your story better than you, because you lived it.
Miss Tubman, let me ask you a question before I move to something really quickly. Where do you currently live now?
Well, right now, I live in Auburn, New York. Do you know where that is?
I do.
So where about do you live?
So where I am now, and what this is called a show, where this is aired out, is aired out of New Jersey.
Oh,
So it's
New
not
Jersey.
that far.
I've heard of New Jersey.
Hmm.
I believe I've passed through it.
Well, I would think on your journey.
Right. New Jersey and Delaware and New York.
And
All
didn't you
of
say
those.
you were in Philadelphia?
Yes.
Yes. So that's not that far from where I normally would go and visit or go to dinner.
Oh, ooh, really?
Yes. So I wanted to find out where you're living at now. So you live in Albany, and do you own your own home?
In Auburn.
Auburn, sorry.
Uh,
Auburn. Do you own your own home?
Well, yes, and the home that I own It was sold to me by a man whose name was William Seward. Do you know? Have you ever heard of him?
No.
William Seward was in Father Abraham's cabinet. That means he was one of the president's men,
Mm.
so to speak. And William Seward was probably the most staunch abolitionist in Mr. Lincoln's cabinet. And he lives right there in Auburn. So I knowed him even before he got to be big and famous. Because
Well, I
he
don't know if
was
there's anybody bigger and famous than you, Miss Tubman.
oh and so him and I was good friends because he was kind of like my neighbor right
Mm.
there in Auburn. Uh-huh.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wow, 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 wow. So I have a thing that I'm going to do really, really quickly. First,
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, Miss Tubman. I don't know if time will ever permit in your future, but there's so much I want to cover, and due to you not knowing how to work technology, because this is something that you're not used to, so
Right.
we are not going to keep you long, but I
Mm-hmm.
would love to extend my guests who will come and watch this show and those who are in the chat now who are watching this show to come back and see Miss Tubman on another show and in a more in-depth conversation about Harriet Tubman and her life and what she has done to add to our history that we now need to be moving and paying it forward. So I just first and foremost want to thank you, Ms. Tubman, for coming and having a conversation with me. And I hope that you will accept this invite to come again and have a conversation because there's so much that we did not talk about.
And I would be mighty pleased to come again, Miss Diamond.
I
I really
really appreciate that. I'm really smiling on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to pause from talking to Harriet Tubman, and OMG, I am going to now talk to Miss Kathryn Harris.
oh,
Hi, Miss Harris.
well, hello. I'm taking off my scarf and I'm taking off my gloves because I have on fingernail polish. Harriet Tubman did not wear fingernail polish.
Miss Harris. Okay, first and foremost, please let me just hold on one second because um, I want to pay my definitely respects to this conversation. And okay, so hold on, Miss Harris, one moment. Okay, hold on. Okay, guys, so I just paused from talking to Harriet Tubman and talking to the great Miss Kathryn Harris, who is who does the monologue of Harriet Tubman. And we're going to talk about that really briefly before we end today's show. But I just want to read a little bit about Miss Kathryn Harris, historian speaker, right? Kathryn Harris began reacting Harriet Tubman in the late 1990s and does so in this interview she did tonight. Harriet talks about her experience as a conductor on the and I was going to pronounce this word correctly. Underground Railroad. Over a period of roughly 10 years, Tubman made nearly a score of trips to slave states to lead the slaves to freedom in the North, risking her own life and freedom each time she traveled south. And the person who brings Harriet Tubman to life like no other, and I'm telling you, although we had some technical issues in the beginning of the show, and I do apologize for that, but listen, the conversation was more important than the situation that arose. So I'm not even worried about that. So I wanted to read a little bit about that before we have Miss Harris actually tell us a little bit about herself and how she came about of doing such a great monologue of a great woman, Harriet Tubman. So again, Miss Harris, thank you for accepting this invite. And can you please take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came about doing the monologue of Harriet Tubman?
Well, first of all, Diamond, thank you so much for the invitation. By profession, I am a librarian. And so I worked at the Illinois State Historical Library, which is now the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. I started there as a reference librarian, but I eventually became the director of the Historical Library and then the director of library services at the Presidential Library. In that position, I was uniquely situated to learn about Harriet Tubman. And I learned about Harriet Tubman because a friend of mine asked me. She was the superintendent of the old state capitol site upstairs, and they did an outreach program to the local elementary school about the era, the antebellum era, and the era of
There
the
we go.
Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the children wanted to learn about was Harriet Tubman. Well, she didn't have a black person on her staff at the time.
Mm.
So she asked me if I would develop the character of Harriet Tubman because she had seen me make another person come alive for a local cemetery walk that we had. So between October, our cemetery walk, and March or April, when she did her outreach program at the elementary school, I read everything that we had in the library about Harriet Tubman. And this was, the internet was not near like what it is today,
Mm-hmm.
but I used the internet in its very early stages, and I even reached out to folks who worked at the Harriet Tubman home in Auburn to get information about Harriet Tubman.
Mm.
So that's how all of that came to pass. So it was kind of, it wasn't serendipity, but it wasn't something I set out to do, but it was something that I did because my friend asked me to do it for the children that she was working with at the local elementary school. So the monologue that I did, or part of the monologue that I do, was written for kids in the 5th grade.
Mm.
But I present it to audiences of all ages, and everybody just seems to enjoy it and learn. In fact, just a week ago today, I presented Harriet Tubman to a group of quilters and women who work for a local extension agency for FHA, uh, Future Homemakers of America.
Okay.
Uh, right. And it's because Illinois is a very agricultural state. So these ladies were probably all farmers' wives, and one of the things they do is quilt.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So listen, I have seen people really try to bring historians to life, but
Hmm.
I'm Miss Harris. When I tell you, I found you on the internet.
Oh wow.
I found you on the internet, and I watched one show,
Hmm.
and it was so powerful. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. Is it any others? And I started Googling Harriet Tubman monologues. I started Googling once I found out what your name was. And your name pops up quite often related to Harriet Tubman.
Hmm.
And for someone to actually bring this character, listen, the questions I asked tonight, and again, because I want to be respectful of your time, the questions I asked tonight, I was kind of going, I wanted to bring in the current day and time, and then also what Harriet Tubman would have experienced during her life as someone who was an enslaved young girl, woman, and then lead people to freedom. I wanted to get that kind of narrative. And I think that, again, if the opportunity ever presents itself, we can go into a further deeper conversation, because I believe that if I honestly had a conversation with Harriet Tubman, the real Harriet Tubman, and then she would have been able to have a peek at what we are looking at today, I'm sure she would be very much heartbroken of what we are facing today after the sacrifice she made to bring people to freedom.
I believe that she would be too, and she would probably chastise us for not doing more, because Harriet was a woman who, she had a strong belief in something, and her strong belief was in freedom, and put her she didn't put her money where her she didn't necessarily put her money where her mouth was, but she put her foot where her idea was, and her idea was freedom, and her feet carried her on that journey. And I am a believer that if more of us would grasp on to some idea, some belief, some concern, some interest, something that is a passion for us, and if we worked at it hard like Harriet worked at freedom, then we'd be in a much better place in this world.
Well, with you saying that, I want you to know that what you do through this monologue and gaining the education and the experience of playing this actual person, not fictitious person, but real life person who walked this planet, you are doing just what we need to be doing, is carrying the torch and teaching people about our history so that we don't repeat the old
Correct.
history. And I
Correct.
thank you so much. There's no words I can truly, truly say to say thank you so much for what you do. I'm
Thank
telling you, thank you. What you do is profound. And we, the young people, need to pay attention to those who are paving the way. Yes, this is entertaining to some people, but this is not an entertainment conversation. This is a conversation that really happened. This is a conversation that many of us need to learn to actually not go backwards, but go forward. We are responsible to carry the torch that Harriet Tubman carried all those years. And enough
Right.
people are not doing that.
I had a friend who calls what I do first person presentation. He calls it edutainment because it's education and entertainment at the same time. So that's kind of
But
a made up word, but it's true.
it's
I
befitting.
I think it's educational and entertaining, and I believe that people remember what they see or hear much longer and much better than what they read in a book. I know I do.
Yes, absolutely. Because we all learn different. Some people are auditorial listeners. Some people
Right.
are visual learners. Some people are hands with their hands, do with their hands, and they learn that way. And you're absolutely right. And we need to, excuse me, excuse me, we need to cater to how can people learn. I
Right.
learned a little bit more about Harriet Tubman that I didn't know as a full adult by watching you repeatedly on YouTube and anywhere I could search you out on the internet. So
Oh
I am
wow.
grateful and thankful for what you do. I just can't say thank you enough. I really can't.
Having said that, I'm going to look myself up on the internet because
Please
I've never,
do.
never done it.
Please
However,
do.
lots of or many folks who ask me to come and make a presentation, that is how they found me, is on the internet or word of mouth from someone who has seen me at a program somewhere. So
I don't think you're doing this to be famous, but I want you to know for many of us, you are someone who's famous. You are.
thank you.
You are. You truly, truly are. So stay right there, Miss. Wait. How can people find you? Is there a website? Is there something that you want? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Listen, Miss Kathryn Harris. If you are looking to book someone, let me tell you, it's worth it. It's worth it. I have not put even a dent into the conversation with Harriet Tubman, the actual character that we were Miss Harris was actually portraying in this conversation. That's not even a dent. She is a wealth of knowledge. Please, 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 all the viewers that are watching this show, hashtag, because as you know in the description in this show, I've hashtagged Miss Kathryn Harris' name. I want her name to start trending and hashtag it with Harriet Tubman. Please do that. That is the challenge to all the viewers that are on this show and that will watch this show. You are challenged to hashtag Kathryn Harris and hashtag Harriet Tubman in the same conversation, your post, wherever you're putting it. Please trend Miss Harris' name along with Harriet Tubman. Let's get her out there so people can know who she is and what she does as bringing this person to life. We can do that. And especially my people that are black and brown people. There's no excuse that you will not do that. You can hashtag everything else. You can hashtag Kathryn Harris. Do that, please. Miss Harris, thank you so much. Don't you move. Stay right there. Hold on. To my viewers, thank you so much for sticking around and listening to this conversation tonight. I hope that you will not find it to be robbery to do what I just asked you to do. Hashtag. And you know what? Let me just do this right now so that you guys see that I am not playing. I am putting it in the chat. I'm sure you guys don't think that. First, we're putting in this chat. I just hashtag Kathryn Harris, and I'm hashtagging Harriet Tubman. So please do me a favor. Do the same and share this show with your friends and on your social media. It's worth it. This is how we keep our history going. This is how we talk about it. You may have learned something that you didn't know. Maybe you already knew this and you're going to post a comment. Please just do that. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sticking around. Click the like button, give us a thumbs up, and also share the show with all your friends. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you guys next week, same time, same beautiful channel. Be well and be good to one another. Bye. Love you guys. See ya.